Hello chess fans! Today I wanted to look at the Ponziani opening, a very dangerous opening at the intermediate and advanced level that not many players as black know. So the opening starts off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and c3. So this is the starting position, and the whole idea is to get this d4 move off as quickly as possible. So first, let's look at what black can do to counteract this. And mainly, let's look at some of black's first move mistakes. So bishop c5 is a commonly played move at the intermediate level, and it's actually already a mistake because after d4, let's say they take and move their bishop back, white already has a very nice grip on the center, and white is doing very well here with ideas like bishop c4, knight c3, and pinning the knight on f6 with the eventual bishop g5, the threat of e5. So here white would be much better already, and this is why this is already a mistake. So next, they can also play d6. d6 is a bad move because you simply blocked your bishop, but you saw your bishop doesn't want to go to c5, but you've defended this pawn. But simply, you've allowed us to play d4. So in this position, black might think they have a nice trick with knight f6 attacking the e4 pawn. But here, white can play a nice move. They can play this move h3. The idea of h3 is, if the bishop were to land on g4, it would put a lot of pressure on the center because the knight is guarding the center, and now we'd be pinning the knight to the queen. So we didn't want to allow that. But you might say, doesn't this hang the pawn? No, because we have a very nice tactic here. After d5 attacking the knight has to move somewhere. Let's say knight e7. We have queen a4 with this fork on the king and the knight. And this is a very common tactical motif in the Ponziani that you should definitely remember. So now let's look into some actual lines from black. So knight f6 is one of the main lines, and I think it is very tricky. Now here, we can't really defend this pawn, so we must continue with our assault. So here we go d4, and we try to put our pawns in the center. And here, let's look at black's main response, which is knight takes e4. Here in this position, we can go d5, attacking the knight, which is also defending the e5 pawn. Here, black has a variety of responses. Now, if black is to retreat their knight, they've kind of made a concession. For example, if knight e7, here we can take on e5, and after something like knight g6, we can simply take that. And notice here that we have more space in the center, and here white is doing very well in the database, and also generally just looks much better. We have more space, and black has nothing to counteract that. But that's not black's best move. Black's best move here is a very thrilling move, which is bishop c5. So now in this position, you don't have to memorize all of this, but I'm just going to show you the line. And if you get it on the board, it will be very important that you memorize it. But it's a very tricky line. So here, black really does not care that their knight's on pre. They simply are going for f2 with all of their pieces. Here we have to take the knight. And here they're going to take on f2 with their bishop. We move our king up to get our king out of check. It was our only legal move. And here they have a few moves. So a losing move on the spot is b takes here. After this, you can go queen a4, attacking the knight. Now notice if the knight moves back, we win the bishop. So here, black has to defend it somehow. If they defend it with d5, they hang c6. So they have to go with this move f5. Here we again attack the knight with this knight now. We want that knight to move. And here, black will simply ignore us and castle. And here, after takes, we can take with the queen, and we are simply up a piece. So this would be one way black can lose the game very quickly if they go for this tricky line. But instead of that, they should probably go for bishop e6. And here is another critical move that's very hard to see from before. The idea is we simultaneously want to remove this knight from the attack. We also want this pawn to become more useful. We don't want it to simply develop their bishop, but we also want to have more squares for our king. Notice right now the king can only move to d1, to d3, or e1, so it's not very safe. But after queen d5, we also have the idea of getting to c2, in which case our king would be quite safe. And notice here, black has to play very quickly because they are down a piece. So here black would go for knight f2, attacking our rook. And here we would just simply defend our rook with rook g1. And here black can play a variety of moves. Here a very common mistake would be actually to just take here, which case after queen takes c5, black is doing very badly here because we're simply going to be able to escape with our king via d2 and c2. So black needs to keep on the aggressive and goes castles. Again, sacrificing another full piece because here we have a fork. And here they would go bishop takes, and we can take the queen. So here black is down 2 full pieces, but the position is about equal. After queen f6, we have this idea to go knight a3. The idea is to bring the bishop to e3 and the pawn, the knight also to c2. And here your opponent actually has to know even more theory. They have to know that here e4 immediately is not that good because knight d4 cuts the connection. So they have to play queen f6 so that after knight a3, e4, if we go for the same move, they can go for knight g4 with the threat to go here immediately, rather than knight g4, and then we could kick the knight away again. So again, your opponent has to know a lot of stuff here. And now here we have to sack the material back with knight c4. And again, your opponent has to know that they can't take here first, because after queen takes, you're actually winning as white with your king having the ability to escape. So instead, they have to know, oh, play rook b8 first, so that after queen d5, now we take here. And I'm going to stop the analysis here because this is a very crazy position. I highly recommend looking at it by yourself. But generally, I think white is doing very well here in the database with most players as black, not really prepping 30 moves in the Ponziani, which is very uncommon. So yeah, now let's look at more main lines. So after c3, they can also go for this move d5. And I'd say this is an easier move to play as black. I think it's much simpler. And I think that black is equalizing pretty much easily here. But white still has a lot of tricks that black has to watch out for. So here we go, queen a4. Now there is also a line with bishop b5, but I think it's simply refuted. So the refutation is after d takes here. You can go knight takes c5. And here there is a refutation with queen g5, and it's very complicated. So I don't recommend that as black. If you ever play against this, just go queen d5. And for example, if they take and go d4 after takes simply and castles, because we can't take the knight because we lose our queen here, black simply has a bishop pair, and even though their structure is not that good, I think I still prefer black here. So that's a simple refutation to bishop b5. So don't play bishop b5. Instead, we play queen a4. Now, generally, we shouldn't move our queen in the opening, but here we have a specific idea. The queen is the only piece that can simultaneously threaten e5 and also defend d4, with defending e4 like this and also threatening the e5 pawn. Here, the most common move in the database, on the Lichess database at least, is to take here, which is a big mistake. After knight takes e5, here white would be significantly better. A sample line goes with queen d5, takes. Notice that if they take with the queen, we have bishop b5 winning the queen because it's pinned to the king. B takes here, and bishop c4. And in this position, white would be much better, and here white has a 70% win rate. So that's the most common move. So already the most common move is make a mistake. Another common move is bishop d7, though this is a gambit because it simply undefends his pawn. And here's a sample line. Again, I highly recommend looking at this if you want to know more, but generally white is going to remain up a pawn, but the position remains in the balance because black has much better pieces. Okay, so bishop d7 is also playable. And now maybe the simplest move for black is to go f6, simply defending the pawn outright. But how natural is it to play f6? And now here I recommend two moves. Now if you want to go for the objectively best line here, you should probably go for the move d3. And for example, after bishop e6, just go knight bd2. Though this is very unconvincing because of the fact that, okay, I mean, black does kind of control the center. So this is not what a lot of players want. A lot of players want to punish black for playing this move and go for bishop e5. And in this position, black really only has one move, which is defend the knight. For example, if black goes for a move like queen d7 defending here after takes and something like castles, I think they're in a lot of trouble after the move d4. Okay, so here black has to go knight e7 defending their knight so that if we take, they can take with the knight. Now here we're going to take on d5, and after queen takes d5, we're going to go for d4. And here I'm just going to give a sample line of what could happen because a lot of different things can happen here. But after e4, we're following a game between a 2400 as white and a 2300 as black. Here, white went for c4. Queen d8, knight fd2, threatening the e4 pawn. So here, black decided to take on d4 because, okay, we left our d4 pawn hanging. Here we had knight b3. Queen e5. We played knight c3. Here, bishop d7 was played, which is a mistake because it allows bishop e3, which would threaten to play knight c5. And so this would be very strong with the threat to take here. And notice there's never any threat of a6. So for example, if they ever go a6, there's never any threat because they are pinned. So instead we went for g3 and knight g6 to stop bishop f4, castles. And here black played a very, pretty much an overconfident move. They played knight h4. The idea is that if we take here, they have bishop d6 and this would be game over. So instead of that, we can, I think what was played was f4, attacking the queen. Now we're threatening to take here. For example, if the queen moves, I think we can simply take here. So they had to take en passant. Now still, if takes here, there is this threat of bishop here. Here, bishop f4, attacking the queen was played. Queen f5. And now here you can't take here because of takes here, but we went knight d5, attacking c7, but also protecting the bishop. Here g5 was played. And bishop takes c7 was played, simply taking the free pawn. Now we are again renewing the threat to take here, king f7. And I'm just going to quickly gloss over these moves, but basically the game got very chaotic. Here, black could blunder a piece like this, but instead they decided to go for bishop e6. And after knight takes f6, if either piece takes, they get pinned here. So we saw some more moves, and eventually white won. But basically the game gets very chaotic in this position, and I think it's a very nice line to play. So that's basically the entirety of the Ponziani opening. I think it's a very tricky opening, very underrated, and not a lot of your opponents are going to know the theory because in my experience of playing over 2,000 games in E5 or like maybe 1,000, I have only seen the Ponziani maybe once or twice, and both times I didn't respond to it correctly because I didn't really know what to do. So I think that it's a very tricky line, and especially if someone who's played a lot of games hasn't seen it, it's definitely a great line to play. So now let's look at my poll. So here I had a poll I made on my community channel. If you've watched all the way to the end of this video, I think you would enjoy this. If you go to my community tab and click on the first post, which is a post about me asking if you want to ask any questions. So I'm going to be doing a Q&A at 1,000 subscribers. So if you guys could answer in that, that would be very much appreciated. And I will see you guys in the next video.